spooky Snuffle mats.
Snuffle mats and toys are super enriching for your pet. They promote use of your pet's natural instincts that they wouldn't normally get to use in your house.
For example, I have guinea pigs, and in the wild a guinea pig would be spending all day like foraging, like going through the grass, running around trying to find food. They don't really need to do that when they're living with humans, right? We kind of just put their food out, put their hay out, and they kind of just eat it, right? Things like this can work out those parts of the brain that are not getting worked out. So it's really good for them mentally. It's also really good for them physically because it'll get them moving around so they're not just sitting eating from a bowl. So I love using stuff like this. This more promotes kind of like the foraging. This will promote more sort of a play. So Maple will kind of just throw this around, and that's great too. So how does it work? Basically, you're gonna get food, treats, veggies, whatever the case may be for whatever type of pet you have, and you're gonna kind of stick it in all the different areas. The grass is kind of overlapping grass, so you just tuck food in there. The pumpkin, I made it like a little sort of flip book is what I'm calling it. I don't know if there's a technical Snuffle name, but it has these different sort of pages that you can open up, and you can put treats under there. The moon I made kind of like stick up, so you can just stick whatever under there. The ghosts are like little pockets, so you just fill those up with food. And same with the bats, they're little pockets, but they're like longer. So you just stick your food in there. You just kind of stuff the food in there, and your pets will just try to find it. They'll use their paws, their teeth, whatever the case may be, to kind of get it out. And any kind of pet can use these. I would be careful with cats just on what type of Snuffles you're giving them. Cats can get what's called whisker fatigue, and that basically means if it's something they have to stick their head too deep into, their whiskers will get irritated, and that can be really kind of mentally damaging for them. It kind of stresses them out. But this one should be fine with cats. Just, kind of watch the way they play with it. But since the little pieces are so small, they shouldn't really be sticking their whole head in anything. So this one should be okay, and the Snuffle ball would be fine for the cat as well. If you have a small pet, like a guinea pig, a hamster, whatever, make it the same size that I did. A cat could even use this size, or a cat and dog, anything larger. You can just make this bigger, and it'll let you hide bigger food, and also more food, of course, because my guinea pigs do not eat as much as a dog does, thankfully.
My next video will be how to make this Snuffle pumpkin, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that.
I want to give you a couple tips for pets who have never snuffled before, or pets who are having a hard time. So my biggest tip when it comes to a Snuffle mat is just to pour stuff on top of it. So don't worry about hiding it the first time. You're just going to take your food or your veggies, plop it on, just have a pile on there. And then they'll get kind of used to eating somewhere other than a bowl. And then what you can do is pour it, but pour it like more evenly over it. So it's kind of just scatter feeding on top of the Snuffle mat. Same idea, they're just going to eat off of it. And then what you can do is slowly start to hide more and more food. And when you do hide the food, I like to kind of show them. So you'll see me with the little baby. I will just kind of open up a little piece so she can see that there's food in there, and then she will go after. Different parts of the Snuffle mat are going to be different difficulties. So like if you shove food all the way in the ghost, that's going to be pretty hard. The pumpkin's going to be a little easier. They just have to barely pick it up. Grass is kind of like a medium level challenging. But also every pet is different. Some pets are going to do easier with things they just push out of the way, like the pumpkin, versus other pets are going to do easier with things like this, where they just have to stick their nose in. So here it is.
Let's get started. Here's my original vision that I referenced when I made the shapes. The first thing you're going to want to do is cut out a bunch of pumpkins. You want them to all be the same size. I made everything out of felt, but I have seen a lot of Snuffle mats where the background is fleece and just the shapes are felt, so you can totally do that if you want to. The ghosts, I kind of just free-handed unique shapes, and they don't necessarily look like ghosts now, but with all the other Halloween stuff, they totally do. I free-handed everything else too, like these bats, but if you want, you could screenshot my drawing and print it out and use that as a reference. I didn't even bother drawing the grass, I just cut it out in waves and looks great. You can do 3 long ones, but I did these small ones just because it's how it worked out with the shape of the felt. The gravestones are the only things that don't look how you'd expect. Basically, I elongated them, so I just made them super tall, and you'll see why later when we do pinning. And Maple thought we needed supervising, so let's just set him up here for a second.
Hey, Molly, what's the guinea pig doing now?
Just chilling with me, you know?
Can I pet him?
If you want. So firstly, if you're wondering why I have so many shapes, it's because I'm making 2, so don't worry. So now I'm kind of just moving the shapes around, trying to figure out where they fit well and where I like them, where they look good, everything like that. So, you know, you don't necessarily need to watch me do the whole thing, so I just sort of sped it up for you. And I like what I landed on, so there's basically 3 layers of grass, 1 moon, 2 bats, 2 ghosts, 2 gravestones, and the pumpkin with 3 layers. What's our tiny supervisor thing?
I smells no food. You said there'd be food in it.
Well, not yet. I have to sew it first. So now for the pinning. If you're new to sewing, you basically just pin things in place so that when you sew them, they stay in the right place. Some of these are pretty straightforward. Quite literally, the ghost and the bat are just going to be on there totally flat, so you just pop a pin in them and that's fine. But others of them, it matters a little bit more how we pin them. Of course, don't let your guinea pig eat pins. They're pretty dangerous. For the pumpkin, we're going to sew straight down the middle, so you want to not put the pins there, so I put 1 pin on either side. Moving on to the grass. Start with the layer of grass that is basically below all of the other layers, so the other 2 layers are on top of it, and then pin the middle layer and then the bottom layer. I'll put it on normal speed for the other side so you can really see what I mean. So I take off the 2 top layers, I put the pin down right in the middle, and basically I'm going to sew a line at the bottom of this. It doesn't really matter where I put the pin because I'm probably just going to remove it when I sew through it. When I'm done with that layer, I'll put down the middle layer, do the exact same thing. I'll just pin through the middle of it, and then I will put down the last layer and pin through the middle of that. The only thing you want to be careful of is to make sure that you're not pinning through the layer behind it, because when you're sewing, you're going to kind of pick up each layer to make sure you're just sewing that 1 layer and the background. You don't want to accidentally sew the front layer into the back layer, because then the back layer won't work right. And don't forget about the mandatory scritches breaks for your supervisor. Real quick before we start sewing, I want to show you these super cute shirts I designed for guinea pig lovers like me. If you order right now with code SPOOKY, you'll get 10% off. Find the link to the shop in my bio. Okay, thanks, back to the tutorial. Now we are going to sew basically everything except for the tombstones. I am starting with the bats. And for the bats, basically we want them to be a little pocket, so I'm only gonna sew all of the top part on the bat. I'm not gonna sew the bottom side. Here's a little graphic to show you where I'm sewing. And next for the ghost, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm basically just sewing the top part and leaving the bottom part open. Here's a picture of that. Something I want to mention real quick in case you don't sew a lot is that when you start out your stitch, it really helps if you go forward and then backward. So maybe a centimeter, you go forward and then backward and then forward again. And you do that at the beginning of your stitch and then at the end of your stitch. And that'll really help to make sure that the beginning and end of your stitch is really strong. Now I'm ready to sew the moon, but I kind of decided to do it a little differently. I was originally just going to make it a pocket like the ghosts and the bats, but I decided that's a lot of pockets, that's kind of boring, I want to do something a little different. So I decided to kind of pick it up sort of like a fortune cookie. So basically I gave it a little more space in the middle than it did before. So I just put the 2 edges a little closer together so that it kind of sticks up, and just to give it a little bit extra texture, something a little different. So now I'm just going to sew a line across the top and a line across the bottom. Take a second to cut off any extra threads, take out any extra pins that you don't need anymore. And here's what the moon looks like. And now we're going to work on the grass layers. We're going to first do the back layer. We're just going to sew a line down the bottom, then the middle sew a line down the bottom, and then the front part sew a line down the bottom. And the bottom of my layers are curvy too, but I'm just gonna basically just sew the line straight. It's really important to pay close attention and do this really carefully. So you want to hold back the other 2 layers when you're working on the layer. Make sure you don't accidentally get them caught in the stitching. Now I know I told you we were going to do everything but the tombstones now, and that would include the pumpkin, but that was before my phone ran out of storage and I needed to, give it time to upload on my computer. So I actually went ahead and pinned the tombstones now. I unfortunately didn't get great footage of how I pinned the tombstones, so I'm going to do my best to explain it. Basically for the tombstone on the left, I just kind of pinned the bottom and then I pushed the tombstone towards the pin so it stuck out a little bit. Then I put another pin down, pushed it back down, put another pin down, and so on until it was a way that I thought it looked good. And for the tombstone on the right, I just folded it in half, pinned the bottom, and I'm just going to sew on the bottom. And each of those places I put the pins are where I'm going to sew. Meaning I sewed in these 4 spots, 1 across the bottom, 2 across the middle, and 1 across the top. And then for the tombstone on the right, I just sewed 1 line across the bottom. And if your grass goes all the way across the bottom, it's totally fine that you're going to end up sewing over that grass because you're not really going to be able to use the grass behind it anyway. So the tombstone's on top, just sew where it goes, and that's totally fine if that includes the grass behind it. And the last step is to sew the pumpkin flip book on, and this is the easiest step because it's literally just 1 line down the middle. But I do want to try to get the grass out of the way so that if I want, I can still use the grass under the pumpkin, or I can tuck the pumpkin under the grass, whatever I feel like doing in the moment. So I kind of freed it from the grass here, and then I just sewed a line down the middle. And you're done! Look how cute it is! You have all these little nooks and crannies you can hide food and treats in, and honestly the end product looks so good, you would have no idea that it was so simple to make. Speaking of really simple things you can do to make your guinea pig happy, your guinea pig would really love if you would hit that subscribe and that like button. We post about guinea pig training, behavior, and lots of other DIYs like this Snuffle pumpkin. And please comment with any other DIYs you would like us to cover. Happy Halloween!